Today's project, sort out my wheels. Problem I've got with these wheels, the lacquer's blown, so it's lacquered straight onto the aluminium, so there's no primer to hold the paint on, so eventually the lacquer lifts. You'll get this if you've got lacquered wheels. It's gonna happen eventually if there's no paint in between, no primer. So pretty expensive to get someone else to do it. I think I've had quotes about £200, about the cheapest, and that's pretty cheap. So I'm going to get on and do it myself. So if you've got this problem, I'm going to show you all the things you need to do to fix it. So if you found this video, it probably means you've got this problem and you're searching for repairing alloy wheels or something like that. This video will show you what you need to do to remove all the lacquer and then polish the wheel. So you've got three things you can do basically. So if you've got this same problem, you see these pictures, the problem I've got, so you've got the lacquer, it's like a milky colour. What's happened is the lacquer's lifted and water's got behind, it's corroded the aluminium, and then there's water in there, so it looks horrible. We just need to do something about it. So three options are: you can take off all the lacquer, you can prime the wheel and then put paint on it. It might look quite nice, but it's going to be a painted finish. Another option you've got is you can take off all the lacquer, clean it up, and then lacquer it again. It will look the same as it did before when they were new, but you're still going to have the same problem because the lacquer's not stuck, so eventually it's going to lift off again. The third one, which is what I'm going to do, is to remove all the lacquer and then polish the bare aluminium underneath. So it's not going to have a surface on it, it's not going to have paint on it afterwards, but it will leave a really nice finish, and a finish that you can keep polishing every now and again just to touch it up, and it will stay in a pristine, polished condition, and have nice shiny wheels. So we're going to get this done about a day per wheel. You're going to need a few things, nothing very expensive. First thing you want to get is some safety glasses. Okay, look after your eyes. Secondly, gloves. I mean, I've put some gloves on. I tend to use gloves to protect my hands. You never know what sort of chemicals or anything's going to get stuck in your hand. Nitrile gloves are pretty good for protecting you. Third thing you're going to need is some wet and dry. Now the most crucial thing in this whole process is this wet and dry paper. Okay, so I've used from 240 grit to 1200 grit, so you want a good range in between those, and I'll show you later how we're going to use those. Now some of the other things I've used a Dremel. Just speeds up the process, but it's not essential. If you're going to use a Dremel, you're going to need a load of Dremel bits, lots of them. The other thing I've used is this 3M wheel and a drill. Now it's not essential, again it's just speeding up what some of the other tools can do. First thing we need to do is give it a good clean. Now I've got a bucket of soapy water, I've got truck wash, much quicker. I haven't got any, so I'm just going to give it a scrub. Now the wheel's nice and clean, we can start by grabbing those safety glasses. Now you may be thinking that the wheel doesn't look too bad when it's clean, but these close-up shots show the extent of the problems we need to fix. I'm going to start by taking one small area of the rim and go all the way from removing the paint to polishing to check that I'm going to get the result I want with the kit I have. First, I'm going to use the 3M wheel and a drill to remove the lacquer. As I said, you could use coarse wet and dry or the Dremel bits with this if you don't have this piece. As the condition of the lacquer is so bad, it really isn't difficult to remove. This is what the wheel looks like after using the 3M wheel. As you can see, there's already a massive improvement. I'll now try the Dremel bits in different grades of wet and dry to see what works best at removing the scratches, of course, by removing the paint in this way. First, I'll try the green Dremel bit, which is 150 grit. Next, I'll use the grey bit, which is 300 grit. As you can see, this left the aluminium pretty smooth, and you may be happy with just removing the lacquer and finishing at this level. I'm going to try to see how good a finish I can get though, so I'll try this Scotch Brite pad to see if I can get to the final polishing stage quickly. I haven't listed this as something I've used because it's a bit of a failed experiment. As you can see, it didn't improve the finish over the finest Dremel wheel, so I ditched it after this test. Next, you'll need to grab a little water so that we can start with the wet and dry paper. The water gives the paper a bit of lubrication and stops it clogging, giving a smoother finish. I'm going straight in with a 1200 grit, which is the finest I'm going to use. The hope is that I can avoid too much manual labour by only using the finest grade paper and then polishing with the Autosol. Get yourself a manageable sized piece of paper and dip into the water before starting. Wipe off the water and grab the metal polish. A small pea-sized blob goes a long way, and you simply need to rub it into all the areas you wish to polish with something that won't scratch the surface further. I keep old cotton t-shirts for this. There's no need to buy special polishing cloths if you plan ahead a little. Find a clean piece of the rag and buff off the polish once you feel that it's no longer doing anything. Now I rushed through this bit, and there are still scratches to remove, but on the whole I'm pretty happy that I have all that I need to polish the whole wheel. Now I have my method, it's time to crack on and get all the lacquer off the surfaces I want to polish. It's worth pointing out here that I don't want to remove any material from the painted black surfaces. This paint is in great condition and really highlights how quickly the lacquered surfaces have deteriorated in comparison. It does mean though that I have to be careful when removing the lacquer that's next to a painted surface so as not to damage it. More on how I do this later. Now I need to deal with the damage to the rim of the wheel. The beauty of polished aluminium wheels is that as long as any damage isn't too deep, you can always file back the rim to a smooth surface and polish it again. Here I'm grabbing a small metal file, but you could just as easily use some 240 grit wet and dry wrapped around something a similar shape, like a nail file or a kitchen utensil if you don't have any files. This bit takes a while, but once I'm done, we'll have all of the damage removed. Once I'm finished with the file, I'll run a 300 grit Dremel wheel over the file marks to smooth them out. Next, I'll flip the wheel on its side so that I can get to the tricky inside edge. I'm taking it nice and slow, so as to be careful not to run over onto the black painted surface. Then I move on to the end of the spokes. I can't imagine any wheel you have will have any more complicated surfaces than these. And again, I just had to go slow and be careful not to slip with the tool. Then it's time to start working my way down the spokes toward the centre. This is how I'm using the rotary tool to remove the lacquer from the spokes without damaging the paint. So you can see, if I want to do this edge here, I have the tool this way, the tool turns in this direction, so I'm moving off the edge. If the tool turned the other way, it would hit this painted edge in here and it would damage it. So that's why if I want to do this edge here, take off this, I turn the tool round. The tool is going to turn this way, which means it comes off the edge, and doesn't damage the paint. There we go, only 11. There we go, only 11 more to do. as you can hopefully see there, in using the Dremel that way, I've left a nice crisp edge where the paint ends, and then we have just bare aluminium on the top. Now that edge needs to be good because you don't want anything getting in there. If that was chipped, then water would get in there, and over time you'd have the same problem as you have with the lacquer, which is the water getting behind and lifting the lacquer off. It would happen on the paint. So you need to keep a nice clean edge to the edge of your paint. Your wheels may not have paint on them. If they don't, you're lucky. These are a lot of work. I'm just going to pause here. I've taken all of this outside edge down to the bare metal with the 80 grit Dremel bit. And I've also done a lot of the inside edges, which are really difficult. We used up quite a lot of the 80 grit pieces, this many in fact. So I bought a bag full. I intended to use them for this, so I'm going to keep going. What I do know is once I've finished with this stage, at least I can go over with the 1200 wet and dry to finish off before the Autosol. If I use anything more abrasive to do the job quicker, it means I'm going to have more work at the end to go down through the grades and take all of the scratches out basically. It's worth persevering at this stage with the lowest grit you can get away with to remove the lacquer, to leave yourself a smoother finish to be able to polish up. If you get bored or you get tempted to go a bit faster and use something more abrasive, you're going to make more work for yourself. So in the long run, there is no shortcut, but you can give yourself less work by putting more work in at this stage. So that's what I'm going to keep doing. Finally, I've got all the Dremel work done, which means I can take these off and now move on to the wet and dry. Okay, so as soon as we start using a little bit of wet and dry, you can start to see these scratches. So these are what we need to get out. There's a couple of ways of doing that. We could go back to the Dremel and use finer grades, or we could use a coarser wet and dry. So I've been using 1200 to clean up the aluminium before the Autosol. But what I'm going to do now is use probably 800 wet and dry and see if that takes the scratches out. Because I know if I only have to go to 800, I can pretty much jump straight back up to 1200, maybe 1000 in between. If that doesn't work, then I'll go to 600. But you only want to use the finest you can get away with. I could keep going with the 1200 and eventually it would smooth out, but I don't want to be here all night. So I'm going to drop down the grades. I need a coffee. So where are we up to? We've removed all the lacquer. We've removed the scratches that the tools that took the lacquer off made. We've then taken those scratches from that stage out. We're now at the stage where I've gone all the way around every surface with paper that's given it straight lines. So we're at the wet and dry stage with straight lines. I've gone a little bit further on the outside rim than I had the spokes. So now I'm going to have to go further with the spokes. Now, little secret, I'm not actually going to polish the spokes anywhere near as much as the outside rim. I know from experience, you really notice this outside rim. And if I were to spend the time to make every aluminium surface completely mirror polished, I'd be here for days. And don't forget there's 4 wheels to do. So I'm just not going to do it. But it will look good. It will look very shiny. You'll see the difference in the end. I'll be happy with the finish. The wheels will look 10 times better than they did with all the lacquer coming off. So I'm going to drink my coffee, keep going. Ooh. This is what I mean about straight lines. The lower spoke here has been finished with 240 grit with the paper moving in straight lines along the length of the spoke. The spoke above it has been finished with a 300 grit Dremel bit, but not in the uniform direction. The coarser surface with straight lines looks better to the eye than the smoother finish with non-uniform fine scratches. I'm going to go through the grades on this spoke to see how much work I need to do. So there you go, quick. Straight line and 240 grit, then 400, then 800, and then 1200, and then Autosol. Took me maybe 3 or 4 minutes, but that's just one. And I've got, I think, 24 to do. So let's crack on. So I'm just polishing up with the Autosol after doing 1200, and I've noticed I've got some scratches. I'm trying to show them here. So at the end of these spokes, there you go, just sort of there, these scratches. So if you get that, it's quite easy. You can just go back down the grades and then come back up. And if you're working on a small area like that, it won't take long. So let's have a go. I'm going to go, I'll try 400, and if not, I'll go 240, then back to 400. So this is 240 grit. As you can see, all of the lines going this way have gone, but now we've got some lines going this way, and that's because if you go across the marks when you're trying to get gouges out, you can see them much better. You see how here there's a few little marks there, whereas this one, they've gone. So now I've got to get these marks out. So this is 240 grit. So now we go through the grades. So I'll just show you quickly on each grade what I'm doing. So what I will be doing is going in different directions with each grade. So again, 240 grit and then 400 grit, and then I'll go probably 600, 800, 1200, and then Autosol again. So let's just see how shiny we can get this. This is after 400 grit. $600, 800, 1200. So you want to be getting rid of pretty much all of the scratches. You can just see a very light kind of brushed finish there just before you go to Autosol. So let's give it a bit of Autosol. There you go. So that's polished with Autosol. Now if you look really closely, you can still see imperfections. So you're never going to get it completely out using this method. However, that is a very shiny spoke, and on a car that's going to look great. Now finally, it's time to use the metal polish to make every surface shine. Autosol on every polished surface. So it's a little bit grubby just from all the dust. So I'm going to go back outside and give it a wash. Another great benefit to the polish is look how the water beads off. So there we go, all done. Now we've got a nice polished wheel ready to go back on the car. Only 3 more to do. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, and remember to hit that subscribe and notification button to make sure that you see when we release a new video. I'll see you in the next video.